I grew up in a ghetto area like this. The one thing I remember about my childhood was when I was 9 years old, when I was in primary school. Things were really bad for my family. And a lot of people think chess is just a game. Chess is more than a game. It's an amazing educational resource. It's a game of strategy. And for the mind of a child, it's very powerful. Teaching them chess allows me to be close to their struggles. And a lot of these children live very difficult lives.
Yes.
Sometimes I even feel that our leaders are far too detached from the consequences of their actions or their inactions, because nobody can be wicked enough to see what those people go through in this place and not do anything about it. When I moved to Ikorodu recently to be closer to my project, and I was coming back from work, and I saw this little boy at the bus stop. He was speaking to scrap into a sack, and it was raining, and I called him and I asked what his name was. His name was Sunday, but he was shivering, so I bought food for him and took him to the community health center, and they diagnosed him with blood infection and malaria. So I gave him medication.
Nigerian youths are not lazy. A few days ago, we came across the story of Sunday and Odunayo that was shared by Mr. Tunde Onakoya, a 26-year-old Nigerian who is using chess to reach out to lives in the slum. Well, today he's going to be telling us how it started and how the Chess in Slum initiative is going so far. Join us on this journey. I'm Temitope Olaya. This is Legit TV.
My name is Tunde Onakoya. I'm a professional chess player and the convener of Chess in Slums Africa. So in essence, Chess in Slums Africa is a non-profit organization dedicated to using the game of chess as a medium to give children living in impoverished communities education and mentorship. Because I grew up in a ghetto area like this. I was privileged to learn how to play chess at a really young age. And it saved me, it gave me a lot of life-changing opportunities. The one thing I remember about my childhood was when I was 9 years old, when I was in primary school. Things were really bad for my family, and I couldn't afford to go to school for like 2 years. So I just had for those 2 years, and that was when I found chess. So there was this barbering salon on the other side of our street there. So the man always had a chessboard there. We played with his friends, so I would just watch them. And then all that time I was going to school. So eventually I was able to learn, and I was fascinated by the look of the pieces.
You said you are the governor of Chess in Slum Africa.
Yeah.
So how exactly do you use chess as a game to impact lives in the slum?
A lot of people think chess is just a game. Chess is more than a game. It's an amazing educational resource. It's a game of strategy. It's a game that enhances critical thinking and all of those things. So using the process of teaching it and using some of the skills that the game instills over time, and for the mind of a child, it's very powerful. It's very important. It helps to build the mind of the child constructively, to let them learn how to solve problems, how to think creatively. Chess is a game that teaches a child not what to think, but how to think for themselves. And that is what education should be about. I've always believed education beyond just being in the halls of the classroom is the capacity of thoughts. When you help a child to think for himself, to try and solve problems through that. So that is how we use chess to teach them,
How did the community see this initiative when you brought it into this part of the community?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, that was when I started thinking about starting a project for children. Like I said, it kind of tells my own personal story, how I grew up and how chess gave me a lot of life-changing opportunities. So I wanted to do the same thing for other children like me that grew up here, because whenever I would pass here, I would see a lot of children on the streets not going to school, and there was nothing engaging for them. The only script that was made available to them was to probably get into drugs or cyber crime and all of that. So then neglecting these children, is going to compromise their future. So I thought about introducing chess to them, since I was a professional and a coach at the time, to give them some sort of leverage, something to be skillful at, to be hopeful about. And so when I first came to the community with my friends and a couple of chess boys, the children, they had never seen it before, so it was a bit strange introducing it to them. I mean, most of them had never been to school before. And chess is a game that requires, some analogies, some complex, terminologies to be able to communicate. So at first it was difficult to teach a child who had never been to school before that a rook, for example, moves vertically and horizontally. But I was amazed that on that first day, it was in a place like this, we just had a chessboard and they were able to master the basics in just that one day. The plan was just to introduce it to a couple of kids, but a lot of them came around, about 100 of them, and we just introduced them to the game on that day. And at first, the parents were like, what is this? Because they needed their kids to probably help them out.
Were they cooperative?
They needed their kids to help them with probably hawking food or something. So, but eventually, a couple of them just allowed the kids. So we'd always come here on weekends, teach them, and so yeah.
Okay, but then how does that put food on their table?
Good. That's a good question, because these were critical questions I asked myself before starting out. But how can chess really change their lives? How will they put food on their table, really? Well, I realized something, about life, about places like this, about communities like this. For some of them, they don't have access to the very basic things. And it's very easy to give them handouts and say, oh, take food. But the food finishes, with time, or you give them money and it finishes. So what then do you do for them that will stay with them for the rest of their lives in a way that they can go on to build the future that they want for themselves? So when I started thinking from that perspective, it made me realize how important it was, to use chess to capture their minds, get them off the streets, engage their minds. When you engage the mind of a child, on it you can go on to imprint values that will stay with them for a long time. So I knew that would invariably end poverty for them in the future, because when they begin to see things from a disparate perspective, when they begin to get educational opportunities, it will take time. It won't be immediately. It won't feed them immediately.
But then, how ready are the children? How ready are they in, learning this new way? They are used to walking on the streets and, just doing nothing.
For kids, chess is a fascinating game, and a lot of them were attracted to it at first, but it requires a lot of hard work to improve, to get better over time. So while teaching them, we try to make them understand that there's always a reward for hard work, to make them understand, to help instill a love of learning, and then, when they understand that when you learn something, that knowledge will become important to your future. It helps them to still stick around despite the fact that it can get difficult at times and all of that.
Well, is there a certain incentive? Do you place incentives or something to motivate them?
Yeah, at first it was the food, because after our sessions we'd always give them food, and a lot of them didn't get to eat 3 times daily. So there's always something they would look forward to. At least we get to eat donuts and drinks, after the training session. But over time, it has evolved into about a lot of them have gotten scholarship opportunities, from there.
From the chess thing, or in their school?
From our programs.
Or from the program.
So eventually we saw that chess could become a gateway to other opportunities for them. For children who were showing great aptitude for the game of chess, people started picking interest in them. Without child, I'd like to send that child to school. So through that medium, we were able to get about 15 children on life, and a lot of these children live very difficult lives in this space. You can't even imagine, because our own privilege as an elite in society shields us from the present realities in some of the slum communities. Sometimes I even feel that our leaders are far too detached from the consequences of their actions or their inactions, because nobody can be wicked enough to see what those people go through in this place and not do anything about it. So when I moved to Korea recently to be closer to my project, and I was coming back from work, and I saw this little boy at the bus stop. He was speaking to scrap, into a sack, and it was raining, and I called him and I asked what his name was. So his name was Sunday. But he was shivering, so I bought food for him and took him to the community health center, and they diagnosed him with blood infection and malaria. So I gave him medication and we went home too. So I couldn't stop thinking about the little boy because he was so young. His eyes looked so hard. It was sure that it was obvious that he had lived a very difficult life. He had missed out on his childhood. He wasn't a child, and so yeah, true. So I got clothes for him and decided to take it to where they lived. And when I got to where they lived in this pan on the river. It was just horrible. It was one of the worst places I'd ever seen. And no human being should live in that place. I saw the father, the water had clothes too, and he had an elder sister who would always sell fish. The father was a fisherman. He also sold firewood on the side. So he would hawk fish around. She would hawk fish that he brings on. And I got to learn that the boy, they've never been to school before. And the girl was already 11 years old and the boy 9 years old. And they'd never gotten any form of formal education before. And it got me really worried. I saw it as a tragedy that these children, they wouldn't, their future was at stake, because of the circumstances of their parents. So I also learned further, after speaking with the man, he got to explain that he lost his wife 3 years ago to malaria. She died in that same place. After conversing with the father, I asked about their mother, and I explained that she died 3 years ago from malaria. She was pregnant in that same place. She didn't get proper medical care. He said he had just 3,000 with him as his life savings. I'm going to the hospital required having some money. I mean, the mentality in places like this is that going to the hospital is only meant for rich people. And instead, they got local herbal herbs, and she died.
Wow.
She died on
while
the same
pregnant.
day, while pregnant, and they had a younger son that was about 3 years old who died on the same day too. So they were sick at the same time. He died in the morning, she died at night. And I couldn't help but imagine that money as little as maybe 20,000 naira have saved their lives. But we didn't know any better, and there was no one to help them. This is the story of these kids, and they're not in school. There's no hope for the future for them. And I thought that I needed to do something. It was impossible to just find this out and just neglect this. So I got home and started talking to people and started raising money for them. So we got them an apartment. So I drew up a plan that we wanted to get them an apartment, enroll the kids in school, find a way to make the father's business more sustainable so I can make more income to take care of the kids and get them food items. So I didn't have a lot of money, So I talked to a few people. So we were able to get an apartment for them. I started making inquiries about their schooling. And last week I decided to share the story on Twitter, and it went viral. And that was what I wanted, really. I wanted their story to be heard. I wanted their voices to be heard. I wanted to bring to people's attention the kind of things that happens in these places that have been marginalized by society. This is the reality of the children here. Who cares about the future of these ones? And Nigerians are amazing people. We're able to raise more than 3 million naira for them. So right now we are trying to help them set up a trust fund to sustain them over time. We're trying to help them set up their apartment properly. We've decided not to put them in school immediately because the adapting, having never been to school before, might be a bit difficult. So the first step is to homeschool them. Teach them the very basics of education, of alphabets, numerals, before putting them in a proper school.
Are you going to get private tutors to achieve this?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we already even got a couple of them. So they will start their classes properly next week and move into their new apartment. So yeah, for them, this is just one.
Is the apartment also in Majidu?
Yeah, no, not in this place, in the other side of the community. Okay. It's a mini flat in a very conducive area. And so this is a fresh start for them, and I'm sure that their future is a lot more secure now.
Funding is usually a major problem for projects like this. So how have you been able to cope?
Yeah, funding. For the longest time, money was a problem. Money is always a problem because there are a lot of things we're trying to get done. We have to get materials, we have to get food for the kids, and when we take them out for tournaments. So, but I mean, thankfully, I've had an amazing team of people that have volunteered selflessly, made a lot of sacrifices for the children, just as I have. Then friends and family. Then, when we started using social media more, sharing our stories, our experiences with the kids, started getting support from the public, donations here and there. So that has been that has sustained us for some time. But going forward, now that we're registered as a proper organization, we hope to now seek proper funding, grants, from organizations that that support initiatives like this to help scale our impact even further. As the dream ultimately is to expand to other communities, and to be able to do that, we need more resources, we need a training space, and a lot of more resources so we can put more children in scholarship support.
Has this reduced crime in society?
For the mind of a child, it's easier to structure their minds in a way now that they won't, just like my own personal story, I could have easily gotten into crime and drugs, but chess was always that one thing that kept me away from it.
So are you playing chess for Nigeria at the moment?
I've played for Lagos State.
You played for Lagos State, and how did that go?
Well, I used to play professionally, and at my peak, I was ranked number 13 best player in Nigeria. But now I don't play that much anymore. I just focus on coaching kids. So what I do professionally to earn a living, I work as a chess coach. So
your love for children. Earlier we saw the way you interacted with those children and all. Is it that you have siblings or what? Younger ones, perhaps?
Well, I have just one younger brother. We're just 2 years apart, even taller than me. So, but my love for children, is drawn from my interactions with them. Spending time with children. I love children. I spend a lot of time about children. And one thing I've realized about children is that they learn differently. They were born in a time that was different from ours, and I consider children as like letters that we're sending into a time that we will not see. So whatever it is you live with them right now is what they will hold on to and continue and make of the future. So it is very important that we take very seriously their development, their growth, their education. So that is why it bothers me a lot when I see children neglected on the streets, fend for themselves.
If you were given the opportunity to speak to Nigerians out there, what would you like them to know? Probably challenges, ways that you want them to come into this project, this initiative. Please, let them hear.
Yeah, so fellow Nigerians, the Chess and Slums project is my dream for this is to use it as a medium to help impact the lives of millions of children across the country. Now, what many people don't know is that there's an educational crisis in Nigeria. In Nigeria alone, there are more than 30 million children who can afford to be in school. Nigeria accounts for 1 out of every 5 children in the world who cannot be in school. That is alarming because an even greater tragedy are the millions of others that are in schools that are below par and they are not learning anything that will be relevant to the future. So, and we say the future of this country belongs to the young ones. But if we're not equipping these young ones, with the right skills, with the right resources, then what happens to the future of our country? So this is why through the Chess and Slums project, we hope to expand to Muslim communities. There are a lot of communities like this that have been marginalized. So get those children living in these vulnerable places, teach them how to play chess as a way to expand their imagination and get them back to school. The Chess and Slums project hinges on 3 things. Using chess as a medium to teach them life skills, getting them back to school with scholarship support, and using it as a medium for humanitarian service. Because there are a lot of problems in these places, and we all need to come together, and support people like this. Because we even neglect the future of the children that live in these communities. In the future, we wouldn't let our own children rest. We wouldn't let our own children know peace. So it is important that we must make sure that our own future too isn't without education. So this is what the Chess and Slums project is committed to doing. To find children in these slum communities and give them a fighting chance, educate them and teach them that it's possible to have dreams and they're valued. So